Miranda set down her coffee and smiled as she explained how my inheritance was now hers. "You're too emotional to handle that kind of money, Greg," she said, like she was doing me a favor. I'd spent 25 years managing million-dollar construction projects. She was about to find out what real project management looked like. But let me back up and tell you how I got to that kitchen table moment, staring at my wife of 12 years like she was a complete stranger. I'm Greg Thompson, 52 years old, and I work as a senior construction project manager for Rocky Mountain Construction here in Denver. Been in the business for 25 years, worked my way up from a field technician who got his hands dirty every day to managing teams of 25 guys on projects worth $2 to $5 million. You don't get there by being careless with details or trusting the wrong people. Or at least I thought I didn't. My father, Tom, passed away 3 months ago after a long battle with cancer. Watching a strong man waste away like that changes you. Dad was tough as nails, built his ranch in Montana from nothing back when land was cheap and work was honest. He raised cattle, grew hay, fixed everything himself, never asked for help from anybody, never complained about the weather or the market prices or anything else life threw at him. Greg, he told me during one of our last conversations at the hospital, "I'm leaving you that ranch money so you can have choices I never had. Don't let anybody else make those choices for you." The ranch sold for $800,000. Not bad for a piece of land Dad bought for $30,000 back in 1978. He was proud of that place, proud of what he'd built with his own hands. Said it represented everything he believed in. Hard work, independence, taking care of your family. I remember driving up there as a kid, helping him fix fences and feed cattle. Dad always said you could tell everything about a person by watching how they handled other people's money and other people's trust. Most folks are decent, he'd say, but the ones who aren't will smile at you while they're picking your pocket. I should have remembered that advice when Miranda started handling our finances. Miranda and I met 13 years ago at a company barbecue. I was a project supervisor then, still wearing a hard hat most days, still getting my hands dirty alongside my crew. She worked for an accounting firm downtown, always looked professional, always had her act together. She had this way of making me feel like I was more than just another construction guy. "You're different from other men I've dated," she told me early on. "You actually build things that matter. You create something permanent." I liked that. Liked how she saw value in what I did for a living. Most women I'd met seemed to think construction work was just for guys who couldn't do anything else. Miranda understood that managing a construction project required brains, not just muscle. Dad liked her too at first. She was polite, asked good questions about the ranch, seemed genuinely interested in his stories about building the place from scratch. But I noticed he got quieter around her as time went on. "She's got expensive taste for someone dating a construction supervisor," he mentioned once after she'd talked about wanting to vacation in Europe. I defended her then, said she worked hard and deserved nice things. But the comment stuck with me. Our marriage was solid for the first 8 years. We bought a modest house in Aurora, talked about kids, planned for retirement. Miranda handled all our finances because she said she understood money better than I did. And honestly, I was happy to let her. I spent my days solving problems with concrete and steel and difficult contractors. She could handle the bank accounts and credit cards and investment planning. The changes started about 2 years ago, right around the time she got promoted to senior accountant. Suddenly, there were new clothes that looked expensive, designer purses she claimed were gifts from her sister, weekend trips with girlfriends that seemed to happen every other month. When I asked about our budget, she'd show me spreadsheets that looked professional but felt vague. "We're doing fine," she'd always say. "I've got everything under control." Dad's illness consumed the last year of our marriage. Between 12-hour workdays and evening hospital visits, I barely had energy to notice much else. Miranda seemed to thrive on handling all the details, coordinating with insurance companies, managing medical bills, keeping track of treatment schedules. She was good at it, organized and efficient. "You focus on being there for your father," she told me. "I'll take care of everything else." Looking back, I can see how she used my grief as cover for whatever she was really doing. While I was watching Dad waste away, she was making moves I knew nothing about. Setting up accounts, transferring money, building whatever scheme she had going. The funeral was hard. Dad had specifically requested a simple service, just family and a few close friends. He didn't want any fuss, didn't want people feeling sorry for him. "I lived the life I wanted," he'd said. That's more than most folks can say. Miranda was perfect that day. Supportive, organized, handling all the details I couldn't focus on. She coordinated with the funeral home, managed the flowers, made sure everybody knew when and where to be. I was grateful for her help, grateful to have someone competent taking care of the logistics while I tried to process losing the only parent I had left. "Don't worry about the inheritance paperwork," she whispered to me as we stood beside Dad's casket. "I'll handle everything with the lawyers." I nodded and squeezed her hand. At the time, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She was my wife, she was good with financial stuff, and I was drowning in grief. Of course she should handle the legal details. I should have paid attention to how quickly she volunteered. Should have noticed how she avoided looking me in the eye when she mentioned meeting with the estate attorney. But when you're dealing with that kind of loss, you grab any help that's offered. Dad had always been careful with money, always planned ahead. The will was straightforward. Everything to me, his only child. $800,000 from selling the ranch, plus another $50,000 from his savings and life insurance. Money he'd worked his whole life to accumulate. Money he wanted to pass down so I'd have security in my old age. "This represents everything I built," he'd told me. "Make sure it goes where it's supposed to go." I had no idea Miranda was already planning to make sure it went somewhere else entirely. 2 months after the funeral, I hadn't seen a penny of the inheritance. Every time I asked Miranda about it, she had another excuse. The lawyers were slow. There were tax complications. The estate was more complex than expected. All reasonable explanations, except something felt off about the way she delivered them. I'd spent 25 years reading people, contractors who were behind schedule but claimed everything was fine, subcontractors who were cutting corners but swore they weren't, suppliers who promised delivery dates they knew they couldn't meet. You develop an instinct for when someone's feeding you a line. Miranda was feeding me a line. "These things take 6 months or more to process," she said one evening when I asked again. "You can't rush the legal system, Greg." But when I called Dad's attorney directly the next day, his secretary told me something different. "The estate was settled weeks ago, Mr. Thompson. The funds were transferred according to the beneficiary instructions. Everything should be complete." That night, I asked Miranda directly about what the attorney's office had told me. She was doing dishes, her back to me, and I watched her shoulders tense when I brought it up. "There are still tax implications we need to resolve," she said without turning around. "I'm handling it, Greg. You need to trust me on this." For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't sure I could. I started paying attention to things I'd been too busy or too trusting to notice before. Miranda left for work every morning at 8:30, claimed to be at the office until 6 or 7 most evenings. But when I called her one afternoon, her secretary said she'd left at 4 o'clock for a client meeting and wouldn't be back that day. When I asked Miranda about it that evening, she had a ready explanation. Month-end reconciliation meeting with a client. Ran longer than expected. Maybe that was true. Maybe I was being paranoid. But I started keeping track anyway, the same way I tracked project timelines and contractor schedules. Miranda was my wife, not a subcontractor, but something was definitely off schedule. The truth hit me on a Tuesday morning in March, 4 months after Dad died. I was cleaning out our home office, looking for my passport to renew it, when I found a folder wedged behind Miranda's filing cabinet. Inside were bank statements for an account I'd never seen before, an account in her name only. The balance was $812,000. The deposit date matched exactly with when Dad's estate should have been settled. I sat in that chair for over an hour, reading through every page. She'd somehow transferred my inheritance to herself, forged my signature on beneficiary forms, made it look like I'd authorized the whole thing. My father's life savings, everything he'd worked 40 years to build, stolen by the woman I'd trusted most in the world. But it wasn't just the money. It was the months of lies while I was grieving. The way she'd comforted me at the funeral while planning to rob me blind. The gentle touches and reassuring words while she systematically erased my future. When Miranda came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the bank statement spread in front of me. She walked in chatting about her day, something about a difficult client, then stopped cold when she saw the papers. Her face went completely blank for a moment. Then she smiled, that same controlled smile I'd been seeing more often lately. "Oh," she said, setting down her purse like nothing had happened. "You found those?" $800,000, Miranda. My father's inheritance. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me like we were discussing weekend plans. No panic, no embarrassment, no attempt to explain or deny. Just casual confidence. "Greg, you would have just wasted it anyway. You don't understand money like I do. You would have put it in some basic savings account, earning nothing while I can invest it properly and actually grow our wealth." The casualness of her response hit me harder than anger would have. She wasn't even trying to deny what she'd done. She was proud of it. Wasted it on what? Paying off our mortgage? Planning for retirement? You're too emotional to make good financial decisions. You proved that when your father was sick, spending money on expensive treatments that didn't even work. She leaned back in her chair like she was explaining something obvious to a child. I'm protecting us, Greg. I'm protecting you from yourself. I looked at my wife of 12 years and realized I was staring at a complete stranger. Someone who could hold my hand at my father's funeral while planning to steal everything he'd left me. This money belongs to me, Miranda. Legally, it belongs to whoever's name is on the account. She tapped the bank statement with one perfectly manicured finger. That would be me. You forged my signature. I managed our family's financial interests. That's what wives do. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. I see. Don't be dramatic, Greg. We're married. What's mine is yours anyway, right? Then why isn't my name on the account? For the first time, her smile flickered slightly. Because you can't be trusted not to do something stupid with $800,000. I nodded and walked out to my truck. Sat in the driveway until after midnight, not thinking about the money, but about the woman who'd stolen it. About how long she'd been planning this. About what else she might be hiding. The next morning, I called a divorce lawyer named Caroline Brooks who'd been recommended by a coworker. Her first question was direct. How much evidence do you have that your wife committed fraud? I have bank statements showing she transferred my inheritance to an account in her name only. That's a start, but we'll need to prove she did it without your consent. If she forged documents to make the transfer, we need evidence of the forgery. Otherwise, it looks like a marital asset that she managed on your behalf. Caroline folded her hands on her desk. Mr. Thompson, do you have any reason to believe your wife has committed other financial crimes? Any pattern of suspicious behavior? I thought about the expensive clothes, the mysterious cash withdrawals, the secretive phone calls I'd been noticing for months. I have suspicions, but nothing concrete. Suspicions won't hold up in court. You need documentation, witnesses, proof of a pattern of deception. Caroline's expression was sympathetic, but realistic. Your wife clearly understands how to manipulate financial systems. She's not going to make this easy. That afternoon, I confronted Miranda directly. Told her I'd spoken to a lawyer, that I intended to fight for what was rightfully mine. She listened without interruption, her expression growing colder with each word. When I finished, she set down her coffee cup and gave me that empty smile again. Go ahead, she said. Sue me. Spend whatever money you have left on lawyers trying to prove something you can't prove. By the time you're finished, we'll both be broke and you'll have destroyed our marriage over money that I'm already investing for our future. She stood up and kissed my forehead like I was a confused child. When you're ready to apologize for this tantrum, we can discuss adding your name to the account. That night, she moved into the guest bedroom. 2 weeks later, I hired a private investigator. Caroline Brooks had given me the name of someone who specialized in financial fraud cases. Derek Castillo, a former Marine who now worked primarily for divorce attorneys, tracking hidden assets and documenting suspicious behavior. Your wife isn't just stealing from you, Derek told me after a week of surveillance. She's running a full-scale investment scam. He spread photographs across his desk, showing Miranda meeting with various elderly people at restaurants and coffee shops around Denver. Always well-dressed seniors, always carrying folders full of paperwork, always looking trustful and hopeful. She targets elderly clients through some kind of bogus investment company, promises high returns, takes their money, and disappears. I've identified at least 12 victims so far, maybe more. Derek pointed to one photo showing Miranda sitting across from an elderly man in a diner. That's Walter Peterson, 87 years old, World War II veteran. She convinced him to liquidate his entire pension fund. Told him she could double his money in 6 months. How much? $87,000. His life savings. I felt sick. Miranda hadn't just stolen from me. She'd been systematically robbing elderly people, probably using the same gentle voice and reassuring manner she'd used to comfort me at Dad's funeral. There's something else, Derek continued. She's been using your name and social security number to open business accounts. If this gets investigated by federal authorities, they're going to look at you as a potential co-conspirator. What do you mean? She's listed you as a business partner on several financial documents for something called Crimson Harbor Investment Group. Made it look like you're involved in the investment operation. Now I understood why Miranda had been so casual about my threats to sue her. If I exposed her theft of my inheritance, I'd also expose myself as an alleged partner in her fraud scheme. She'd protected herself by implicating me, but Derek had also given me the weapon I needed to turn the tables. The good news, he said, is that financial fraud is a federal crime. She's looking at serious prison time if this gets reported to the FBI. The bad news is that she's smart enough to have covered her tracks pretty well. Over the next 3 weeks, I applied the same methodical approach I used on construction projects. Clear objectives, detailed documentation, verified sources, systematic progress toward completion. I treated Miranda like a problem that needed solving, not a wife who'd betrayed me. Derek helped me identify all 12 victims. We documented how Miranda approached them, what promises she made, how much money she took from each one. The pattern was always the same. She'd present herself as a successful investment advisor, show them fake returns from other clients, convince them to trust her with their retirement savings. The worst case was Walter Peterson, 87 years old, living alone since his wife died 2 years ago, trying to make his pension stretch until the end. Miranda had convinced him to give her everything, promising to double it within a year so he could leave more to his grandchildren. She seemed so professional, Walter told me when I visited him. Had all these charts and graphs, talked about market opportunities I'd never heard of. Said she was helping successful families grow their wealth. Derek and I also discovered that Miranda had been forging my signature on business documents for months, making me an unwilling partner in Crimson Harbor Investment Group without my knowledge or consent. She'd use my identity to open bank accounts, sign lease agreements for a fake office, even list me as a co-owner of the fraudulent business. She's been planning this for at least 18 months, Derek explained. Your father's inheritance was just the latest score. She's been building this scam operation piece by piece, using your name to make it look legitimate. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that Miranda wasn't just a wife who'd made a bad decision. She was a career criminal who'd married me as part of a long-term plan to steal money and disappear. But she'd made one crucial mistake. By using my identity without permission, she'd given me everything I needed to destroy her. The forgery of your signature on federal business documents is a separate crime, Derek pointed out. Even if she claims you knew about the investment business, we have proof that you never consented to any of this. I spent another week documenting everything. Bank records showing how my inheritance money had been used to fund her criminal operation, photographs of her meetings with elderly victims, business documents with my forged signature, and witness statements from people she'd defrauded. Most importantly, I had proof that she'd stolen my inheritance while actively running her investment scam, which meant the $800,000 was being used to fund federal crimes. On a Thursday evening in late April, 6 months after Dad's funeral, I sat down at our kitchen table with everything I'd collected organized like a construction project file. Bank records, photographs, recorded conversations, victim statements, and business documents showing how she'd used my identity without permission. When Miranda came home from whatever she'd actually been doing that day, I was waiting for her with a sealed manila envelope. "What's that?" she asked, setting down her purse and eyeing the envelope suspiciously. "Something you need to read before we have our final conversation." She looked at the envelope, then at my face. For the first time since I'd known her, Miranda looked genuinely uncertain. "Greg, if this is about the money again, open it." Miranda's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were photographs of her meetings with elderly clients, copies of forged business documents using my name, and bank records showing how my inheritance money had been used to fund her investment scam. "Where did you get these?" she whispered, her face going pale as she flipped through the evidence. "I've been documenting your crimes for the past 2 months," I said calmly. 12 victims so far, including Walter Peterson, an 87-year-old veteran who trusted you with his entire pension. She dropped the papers like they were on fire. "Greg, you don't understand what you're looking at." "I understand perfectly. You've been running an investment fraud operation, stealing money from elderly people, and you used my inheritance to fund it. You also forged my signature on business documents, making me an unwilling partner in federal crimes." "This isn't what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like." I pulled out my phone and showed her the contact information for Special Agent Patricia Williams, FBI Financial Crimes Division. "One phone call, Miranda. That's all it takes. If you report me, they'll investigate you too. Your name is on those business documents, because you forged my signature, which is also a federal crime. And I have evidence proving I never consented to any business partnerships with you." I gestured to the documentation spread across the table. Derek Castillo is a former federal investigator. He knows exactly how to present evidence that will hold up in court. She looked at the papers again, her hands visibly shaking now. "Greg, we can work this out. We're married. We can figure something else out. You have 2 choices, Miranda. Transfer my inheritance back to my name immediately, along with whatever returns you've earned, and I'll give you 24 hours to disappear before I call the FBI. And if I don't..." I stood up and walked to the phone mounted on the kitchen wall. "Then I make the call right now, and you can explain to federal investigators how you stole nearly $1 million from elderly people while forging your husband's signature on federal documents. Her face had gone completely white. You're bluffing. Try me. The next morning, Miranda was gone. She'd left during the night, taking only 2 suitcases and her car. On the kitchen counter, I found signed bank transfer documents returning the $800,000 to an account in my name, along with an additional $43,000 in investment returns she'd managed to generate. She also left behind a handwritten note. I thought you were too weak to fight back. I was wrong. 3 days later, something interesting started happening. Walter Peterson called me first. Mr. Thompson, this is Walter Peterson. You came to see me last week about my pension money? His voice was shaky but excited. I just got a call from my bank. Someone made an anonymous transfer into my account for $87,000. The exact amount I lost. Over the following week, Derek helped me track what was happening. All 12 of Miranda's elderly victims received similar anonymous transfers, returning their stolen money with interest. She'd liquidated everything she'd stolen from her investment scam and given it all back before disappearing. Smart move, Derek explained. She probably realized we'd documented enough evidence to put her away for 15 to 20 years. By returning the money, she might avoid federal prosecution if she stays out of the country. A month later, I learned just how smart her move had been. Derek called with news that federal investigators had been tracking Crimson Harbor Investment Group for 6 months as part of a larger financial fraud investigation. She was already on their radar, he told me. The FBI was building a case against her operation when she suddenly returned all the stolen funds and vanished. They issued a warrant for her arrest anyway, but she's probably in a non-extradition country by now. Any idea where? Last intelligence suggests somewhere in Central America. Mexico, maybe Guatemala. Living under an assumed name, working low-wage jobs, can't access any legitimate banking systems because she's flagged in international financial crime databases. The woman who'd thought she was smart enough to steal my father's legacy had ended up losing everything while making his memory stronger than she'd ever been. I used Dad's inheritance exactly the way he would have wanted. First, I paid off our mortgage completely. The house was mine now. Miranda had signed quit-claim papers before she fled, probably to avoid any legal entanglements that might slow down her escape. Then I established the Thomas Thompson Agricultural Scholarship Fund through Colorado State University. Every year, it provides full tuition assistance to students studying sustainable farming and ranch management. Kids who want to build something lasting like Dad did. The first scholarship ceremony was held on what would have been Dad's 75th birthday. 23 applicants, all from rural Colorado and Montana families, all planning to go back to their communities and continue the work Dad had started 60 years ago. The winner was a 19-year-old kid named Jake Morrison from a small town outside Billings. His family had been farming the same land for 3 generations, and he wanted to study sustainable agriculture so he could keep the operation going while protecting the environment for his own kids someday. Mr. Thompson, Jake said after the ceremony, shaking my hand with the kind of firm grip Dad would have appreciated. This scholarship means everything to my family. My dad says to tell you that your father raised a good man. I had to excuse myself for a few minutes after that. Every year since, I attend the scholarship ceremony and think about Dad's ranch, about the values he tried to teach me, about legacy and what it really means. Miranda thought she could steal everything he'd worked for and disappear with it. Instead, she'd made his impact bigger and more permanent than it ever would have been otherwise. Walter Peterson and I became friends after everything settled down. He invited me over for coffee every few weeks, and we'd talk about the war, about building things that last, about trusting the right people. He was sharp as a tack despite his age, full of stories about growing up during the Depression and serving in the Pacific. That woman of yours nearly cost me everything I had left for my grandkids, he told me during one of our visits. But what you did, documenting everything, building a case like that, took real planning. That took guts. Walter passed away peacefully 2 years later. His grandson sent me a letter saying Walter had talked about me often, called me the construction fellow who knew how to fight the right way. The family used the money Miranda had returned to pay for Walter's final medical expenses and still had enough left over for his great-grandchildren's college funds. You know what I learned from all this? 25 years of managing construction projects taught me that the most dangerous problems are the ones that look simple on the surface. You don't spot them by being paranoid. You spot them by paying attention to the details that don't add up. Miranda thought I was just a simple construction manager who wouldn't know how to fight back. She forgot that I'd spent a quarter-century reading people, spotting problems before they became disasters, and managing complex situations under pressure. She became my most challenging project. And like every project I've ever managed, I saw it through to completion. These days, I'm more careful about who I trust with important things. Not paranoid, just careful. There's a difference. Trust is still important. It's what holds families and communities together. But now I verify the important stuff, the same way I verify contractor credentials and material specifications. I'm dating again now, a nice woman named Sarah who teaches elementary school. She has her own retirement savings, her own career, her own life. When she found out about the scholarship fund, her first question was whether I needed help with the selection committee. When I told her about Dad's ranch and what it meant to our family, she understood why protecting that legacy mattered so much. "Your father would be proud," she said after attending the 3rd annual scholarship ceremony, "not just of what you built, but of how you protected it." Dad's legacy lives on now in ways he never could have imagined. Every year, another young person gets the chance to build something lasting because of the money he earned and the values he passed down. Miranda thought she could rewrite that story, but she only made it stronger. Federal investigators eventually closed Miranda's case when they discovered all victim funds had been returned with interest, though the warrant for her arrest remains active. Her professional accounting credentials were permanently revoked, her assets frozen, and she was added to international databases that prevent her from opening legitimate bank accounts anywhere. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, she was working as a waitress in a small Mexican coastal town, struggling financially and unable to return to the United States without facing immediate arrest. Her family disowned her after learning about the elderly victims she'd targeted. The woman who thought she was smart enough to steal my father's legacy ended up losing everything while making his memory stronger than she'd ever been. That's the thing about trying to steal from someone who's spent their life building things that last. We know how to protect what matters, and we know how to make sure it survives whatever tries to tear it down. Miranda learned that lesson the hard way. And wherever she is now, washing dishes in that Mexican coastal town, I hope she remembers it every single day.